Wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone. We thank you for tuning in. Today is Sunday, September 11th, and we are broadcasting the show, which is definitely a very, very powerful, very positive, informative day, and we'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. The title of the show is The Alchemy of Money. I'm your host, Sevan Bomar. I am the author of The Code to the Matrix and the developer of the Resistance website. I'm also here in the studio with Pablo, Mr. Spirit Matter, and Luis Hull. And we are broadcasting this show to you today, not only over Blog Talk Radio, but also over live stream. For those that are listening to the show today, we ask that if you do have the ability and opportunity to go ahead and to tune into our live stream, which is www.livestream.com/understanding, or you can simply go to the Resistance website. That's www.resistance2010.com. Scroll all the way to the bottom and you will see a live stream widget there. Simply hit play and you will be put right into our live stream show. Before we get started, we're just going to go over a couple things just to make sure our live stream gets started correctly, because this is, of course, a hyper-interactive show. We did reschedule the show from 1 hour to an hour and 30 minutes today because of the nature of what we'll be discussing. To get a little bit into what we're going to be discussing, you've never seen anything like this before, I can guarantee you that. And the reason is because we've accumulated knowledge and information from sources that are not yet being looked into. And that knowledge and source happens to be about currency, what exactly runs and controls this planet. Many people will actually get into great argument about that, but the reality is that excuse me, I just had a brief interruption there, but the reality is that everyone can feel the strain of the financial around the world when that thing when it happens for a person where they don't have any money, then they have all sorts of situations to deal with. And when they do have a lot of money, well, of course, they still have situations to deal with. And that's what we'll show today, is that what is actually binding us here is something very ancient and very mystical, far beyond what most people will gander, but now because of the knowledge that's being presented, we're able to do that for you in a way in which you cannot doubt it. I will say that the Resistance as a faction has been responsible for bringing information not known currently to this planetary system. You might want to tell him that your camera is introverted, so you have to click onto the screen. Everyone, if you could just hold on for a brief moment, we want to broadcast to you the right way. So we're going to need to make sure everything is correct with our live stream, of course, because we're just getting the show started today. So if you know the difference between the buttons, it's one where you're looking. If everyone would just hold on really briefly, I just want to make sure that our stuff is correct. Okay, so I think we should be okay on the live stream. Are we okay now? Okay, so you should be able to tune into live stream. Once again, that's www.livestream.com/understanding. The reason why it's going to be important is because we're showing a lot of images, and if you don't see those images, then it's going to be very difficult for you to understand exactly what we're speaking of, and it's definitely going to be more difficult for you to believe that it's true. I think one time there was a particular video that was a little bit beyond when it comes to currency, and it was shot by a program. I do forget the program on History Channel, but the gentleman that was being reviewed was named Doc, and he was supposedly an individual who was a part of the Illuminati and who was involved with their sigil design when they design magical images and things of that nature, and how to use symbolism in secretism. And what he revealed within the U.S. dollar bill was that behind the web of the $1 bill in the, I think, bottom left corner, there actually was what appeared to be a malevolent archangel. And this was so clear to see that it started to have many of us thinking about currency, but of course we were swept away to other ideas for a while. And now it's time for the true revelation of what this currency is about to be given to you. And so how we're going to start this is we're first going to start with the notes, which I actually left on the Resistance website now underneath the post that is the title of the post today's the post that's the title of today's show. And so if you go to that post now, you'll actually see some topics discussed down. Then you will see that there is now a list of topics that are being discussed, and I'm going to try to maintain somewhat of an order here, also so that Pablo can be able to show you the images of what we're speaking of in the proper order. Now, if everyone remembers, last show was really centered around the divided ones, which are what we are calling the demons, or the D-man, the divided man. And it's interesting to have this show come later because it actually is the explanation of more of what the divided ones have been doing. And as many people know, that our network is now twofold. It's more like a yin and a yang so that we can keep balance, because we cannot fail to report all of the esoteric and spiritual knowledge that is being sent to us by the higher sources in our own intellects, etc., but just a collaborative of individuals, even droid or the machines or computers even contributing and searching for information. So everyone is really involved. It's just what's happening. So what's interesting to point out now is that this concept of coming together, what ends up happening is that the first thing that has to happen when a person decides to make a truce or to stop being divided is they somewhat have to confess, meaning they have to explain some of the activities and deeds that they've been involved in. And I believe that me personally, I've been responsible for being more or less the voice of many of the beings that are coming to either explain their story, whether that story they just want someone to hear, or whether they're very sorry about some of the things that they've actually done, and so now they're finally bringing out this information so that people can get themselves correct. And that is the kind of story that's actually going on today, because if many people notice with their currency that there's many individuals on that bill. Like, on every single bill, you will always find an individual on it. And this becomes the most important thing. And I'm going to show you something just really quickly about critical thinking and the way that many of the advanced beings think is they take things apart in order to find its power. And if you were to do that with the dollar, the first thing that you would notice is that it's a rectangle. And the next thing you would notice is that it has symbols on it. And this is just something. Almost all currency, at least 90 to 95% of the currency, is in the shape of a rectangle. In addition to that, 90 to 95% of that currency has someone's face on it. 90 to 95% of that currency is using some type of sacred geometry. So this 90 to 95% of most currency is made from paper. So what we start to develop here is we develop hardcore principles that will lead us to the understanding of exactly what money is about, through a methodical way, non-biased, not guilt-tripping ourselves, and not in denial either. So the reality is that there is a huge connection between sound, shape, and light. Sound equals shape equals light. And this is very important to realize, because even if you can't hear the sound that a shape is making, it's only because of a non-active third ear. Many people talk about the third eye, but there is a third ear that has a holophonic sensor that can hear the vibration of the spheres and the vibration of trains, planes, buildings, many different things, that if the third ear can hear them, because it's the third ear's responsibility to make sure it works in unison and projecting your reality. So the reality that we're living here in is making a sound, and all those frequencies are coming together and making what you see present before you. It's giving you the colors, and it's giving you the shapes. So from that point, we should see now money as not just a piece of paper, but an actual projection, or what I'm now calling an arc. A projection of actual consciousness in the actual world. And many people may deny this because they don't know the knowledge of talismans and things of that nature, but I'm here to tell you that there is a heavy knowledge within symbolism and making certain symbols and drawing certain things on paper that makes the cosmos and the powers that are around the cosmos submit to one's request. It's almost like a letter. And it becomes important now to roll right into this, because what we'll see is that there is one being in particular, and we could just call them beings, it's more easier because it's easier to identify that way, that is responsible for taking these messages and bringing these messages to the denizens of Earth. And that being has been known as Thoth, or some have mistaken it for Mercury, but the reality is the being is also called Hermes and Tehut or Tehuti. And this name has resonated with many as being wisdom and being things of that nature, and many have looked highly to these beings, but few people have done any research more than just listening to someone else who has explained this to them. So the reality becomes is that the actual identity of Thoth, it needed to be investigated, and I had the opportunity to do that in my daily task of uncovering all of the knowledge that's here on this planet and also throughout the universe. And I discovered the identity of Thoth was actually related to the moon, and this happened slightly before our time, but there was actually a war that took place in which the being that everyone is calling Hermes or Thoth, who carries the same staff of the double-twined serpent, which is also known as the dollar sign. Some people relate it to Kundalini. The reality is that this being symbolism and who it was telling everyone exactly what it was. First of all, Thoth is the same word that we use when we say thought. So this being is heavily related to the brain. He carries a staff that is two double-twined serpents, which means that he's possessing a power. And this power we'll get into in just a little bit. But the interesting part of it, people don't want to realize that what is going on the moon is affecting us here. They should realize that when our messages go out, our psychic message, it goes first to the first celestial body in our sphere, which, as we can see, is the moon. So the moon then knows that information, and depending upon what that information is, sends it to the proper energy. So it's more like a processing center. Sends it to other planetary systems. But the problem with this is that if the moon is more like a club, for better lack of words, meaning that there are certain people that are involved in the moon cult, if you happen to be sending a message to individuals or beings that are not involved in the moon cult, then it never gets there. In addition, if a message comes from beyond the moon, and it comes from beings that are not involved with the moon cult, then it never gets to the individual in the correct way that it was supposed to be transmitted. So the moon becomes like a direct hack. And that's why everyone became responsible, and for moving out of their brain and moving into their heart, as we uncovered last week, is because the brain was being hacked. Like there was so much information coming across through the psychic waves that many people were starting to catch bad news and bad feelings and bad information consistently. And that is because the brain frequency is completely contaminated. So we were encouraged to switch to the heart because it has a better way of transmitting information. It is, for better lack of words, the bridge or the base to. Now, notice in the explanation of Thoth, what it says is actually the brain within the heart. So it actually explains very deeply that in the terminology that we now know to understand that we have a brain in our head, we have a brain in our stomach, and we now also have a brain inside of our heart. And this being is there, which would make perfect sense, even though this script from the ancient times, which is clearly correct about Thoth, tells you that. You can also see, because the heart is the anagram for the planet Earth, that it would obviously be very close to our heart, whatever this moon is. And so we find out that identity goes once again into Thoth. And so it becomes very important for us to understand just that Thoth, Hermes, is the governor of the moon. The moon is very connected to money. That's why it's basically saying moon E. And that E is what's called a trident, or what's called a side. It's a form of how to send energy. That's why energy starts with an E. And if you also notice, if you turn a 3 around, it's also an E. And so what this is about a collaboration. This is about a trinity. This is about more than one particular type of being that we're just calling divided ones that have set themselves up to rule over humanity, and they've already been doing this. And this is what you can see within the currency. What you will see is, one, the direct symbolism of who's doing all this, which goes under the symbol of an 8-pointed star. An 8-pointed star has always been known as the star of Ishtar, which is also where we get our word start. So anytime a person says, I'm going to start something, they also say Ishtar as a name. When a person says that they are looking for a star in the sky, they are actually just saying, I'm looking for Ishtar. And this needs to be people need to really, really pay attention to this. Because the reality of all of this becomes is your words are creating things all the time, like we were talking about. They're creating a shape and they're creating light when you say them. So if you don't understand what you're saying, then don't fault everyone else because you've bought and evoked something into your life. The best thing to do is to realize one is doing that, work on your speech, your knowledge, and grab the reins of your chariot, because something else is driving it. Here on this planet, a person has been made to be mentally, spiritually, and physically a slave. And how that works is that spiritually, of course, the religions are set up for a person to go and serve. So they're a slave. Physically, they must go to the job every day and work for this money, even though they don't really want to be there. So they're a slave. Physically. Mentally, our minds are hijacked with loads of junk DNA, or what I call junk information, and thus the mind is mentally in a prison. So what we come to tell you here today is that the resistance, in conjunction with the Wholeness Foundation, is here to free you from that prison. To be able to do that, we must discuss things that have never been discussed before, because obviously if they had been discussed before, then the problem would already be solved. As I was explaining to people, the real power within names are when you're calling on certain names, then if those names are truly powerful and here to help you, then there will be an immediate response. And people need to think about that when they're calling the names that are associated with Christianity, to why other individuals that are doing that from the dark and deepest levels but still saying those names are allowed to do that. And it's definitely because those names and those words are related to these energies themselves that are actually in division, meaning that they're attempting to cause mankind and the animals and many other beings to continuously war with one another. People should understand that even the J on the word Jesus, a J is a hook, and that's why they call them fishers of men. When a person that is fishing for men is really fishing for souls, because the word men is simply the Egyptian god of fertility. And once that fertilization begins to happen, it comes into the symbolism of a snake or a fish, because there's not too big of a difference as they both have scales. So people need to understand that once the human being becomes divided or crossed, then they lose a great deal of their power, and their reincarnation is generally as some type of animal. If they get crossed again, then their next life is as something of an insect. If they get crossed again, then their next life is something like a tree. And so as we talked about, the Knights of Malta told the Catholics, you may have the cross, but we have the true meaning to the cross, because they understood what you'll see here on the currency, which is the use of the double cross, which is the symbol or the mark of Cain. It's known that in the Old Testament that Cain was given a mark to roam throughout the land so that he could not be conquered by his father, that mark was given to him by his father, which we now know to be part of the serpent god faction. And it's very important here to realize that to say that all serpents are evil is just as silly as saying that all humans are good, because there is a large part of the human being, as they call it, the Homo sapien, and sapien means serpent, or the reptilian portion of the brain, which is actually a hack into the brain, changing the consciousness of the brain, that there's definitely been some involvement with some type of hyperdimensional beings. However, human being is exactly that. They are hyperdimensional. And when I saw my hyperdimensional self, I saw that my mind and my heart was controlling which dimension I was in. And that because this one had been thought about and I had been binded to it so much, then it became a problem for me to realize that I was hyperdimensional. And how this binding takes place is very close to with trees and ropes and ties. If you notice that on just about every single city or country or state or continent's currency, you will at times find a tree associated with it. Not just the tree that it's written on, but also maybe a state or county seal of a tree. And also when reading into the deeper Masonic encyclopedias, we find that every single degree is associated with a different tree. And this is because of an ancient secret that few will lend you time to tell, but it is about the association between snakes and trees. That somewhere in the evolution, or whatever you want to call it, of this grand creation, snakes end up being trees or trees end up being snakes. And what you're actually looking at with the branches is the tentacles. In fact, there are many different beings that seem to exist 1 or 2 levels below us that actually, they have no face. They use the tentacle to feel about and feel things. And so this relationship is also what they're attempting to capture in Genesis, although they're not alluding to you what exactly is going on, but they talk about Eve and this tree being somehow joined together in the beginning of the fall of mankind, as they're calling it, which is actually a staged plan, not something that mankind is doing on his own, but a way in which to cause us to fall. And you will see that here with the currency, that there's a perpetrator that is attempting to link us all in with it as we continue just to try to survive. And this happens with money. So there are generally 2 serpents shown on the pole, which gives us the Caduceus rod. It's important to identify what those 2 serpents are, and there's been a lot of debate here these days in trying to discover what exactly these 2 serpents are about. Many have alluded that this is Kundalini, that Kundalini should rise from the base of the spine into the brain, and then that activates a person. And I found that this may not be entirely true, that it's more like that there is an energy that rests in the head, and it must come down, or what they call descend like a dove, from the head into the center solar plexus or heart area, while there is another energy that must come from below, and it must go all the way up and then meet at the same place. So these 2 must meet in the middle. It's not that one goes to the other. And when those 2 meet, then it causes an activation of Kundalini, thus ruling out the Caduceus staff as an actual symbol of Kundalini, save that it's an individual who has the 2 serpents risen into their brain, thus controlling their thought and everything that they're about. And we find that this may be true because when looking at a great deal of the Egyptian symbolism and the symbolism from many other tribes, such as the Indonesian, those that understand the Naga or worship the Naga, etc., that they keep these serpents on the crown of on the top of their crowns, symbolizing that it's simply remaining in their mind and in their head, not cycling. So it's important to pull apart some of this symbolism and exactly what it means. In addition to that, if we notice with the $sign, which is actually your number 4 on your computer keyboard, you will notice that there is only 1 stick going through it. And this has been changed from the original 2 sticks going through it. And this is because there was always knowledge that one of those serpents were poisonous, as we talked about on the previous show. And that one of those serpents wasn't as harmful as the other, but again, you're still dealing with serpentine energy, and there's a great deal of power and a great deal of responsibility that comes with such things, and we have now more recordings of individuals that have failed with it than individuals that have actually progressed with it. But this is, I guess, maybe a work in progress itself for humanity to when they will stop falling under the same tricks and spells. Because what's happening is that when they show that one serpent or one stick, they're showing that is, or the one S around the stick, that is simply showing that they're using the poisonous one. And so that becomes the tune of money, is that whoever is choosing to put it out is not putting anything at all and has no interest in doing that. And so to recap, the 8-pointed star is of Ishtar. The word Ishtar can just be looked at as I-S-H-T-A-R, but that I-S is where you get your $ from. Ishtar is also Ashtar and many other names, but mainly known as Isis. And if everyone pretty much knows at this point that's in the occult circle, that when you compress the name Isis into one symbol, it makes a $. So this shows you further that a great deal of these 8-pointed stars that you're seeing and this connection to Isis is alive and on deck. And so I'm going to read an excerpt here that gives you more of a clarity on why the kings and the queens and things of this nature, tribal leaders, etc. of this world became intrigued by this being, and ultimately it's causing the demise of our world. So of course, in identifying it, that would actually reverse the cycle and allow people to regroup. So I'm pulling up one particular excerpt, and I'll have Pablo pull that up on the screen also on live stream for those that have not tuned into that. It's www.livestream.com/entertainment. And he's going to pull up an excerpt called The Origins of Ishtar, and I will read it very briefly here. And it says, on the one hand, therefore, Ishtar was depicted as a heralded, naked goddess, and on the other as heroine and queen. The goddess is the spouse and lover of the king, and whom she participates in the ritual of a sacred marriage. She provides the king with economic blessings, as well as power and victory in war. Inanna Ishtar is associated with the cults of many cities. She is particularly prominent in Uruk, Akkad, Kish, Nineveh, and Arabella. In Uruk, but particularly in Akkad and Assyria, she is a goddess of war and victory. In Mesopotamian literary texts, Inanna Ishtar has a coherent and believable, if complex, personality. Inanna Ishtar is a young, independent, and willful woman of the urban class. She is a product of an urban world and is closely associated with cities more than with cosmic functions. Now, I want to stop here because I just keep seeing Beyonce. The idea of a very independent, upper-class woman, but how that woman is nowhere near connected to what the earth and what the earth is all about. Because she is not connected to the cosmic functions, but more of just the functions that take place within cities. So, I continue to read. It says, she seems to be constantly on the move, perhaps because of her association with heavenly bodies and unencumbered women. And what this means is that many in the heavens have taken Ishtar ideas and Inanna type ideas and made them a part of their own, and then that also would make them restless and discontent. And thus her character also. And as it continues, it says here, Inanna Ishtar often appears as a sexually attractive being, but she remains unsatisfied and is constantly injured, striving and contentious. She tends toward anger and rage and troubles heaven and earth. One is tempted to talk of early psychic wounds. So regardless of how much the world wants to remain in denial, what we find when we read texts such as these is not just someone to point the finger at, but actually characters and traits that reside within ourselves because of our affiliation with this type of behavior. Because ultimately, as you've seen, that money becomes the lowering of a person's morals, especially a woman. And many women have been, if you want to call it, forced to take money in lieu of sexual desires and pleasures and things of that nature. And even men that she's not wanted to have as her consort, she's chosen as her consort because of the money that the individual has. But to understand also that a great deal of the archetype of women, which comes from Venus, was already engaged in such practices, and because the archetype was doing it, that energy is bleeding into the reality. Just as the energy of Thoth or Hermes, who is also androgynous, is bleeding into our reality because of the affiliations that people are making that they don't know about at this point because they've been doing it for so long. It's coming under the guise of money now, but several lifetimes it's come under different guises. A false currency, something that is supposed to be giving us energy, but in all actuality is actually dead, a withered tree, and should not be giving us any type of satisfaction. So thus, because we fooled ourselves to believe that satisfaction will come from it, then we put ourselves in quite a bind. Again, this is the way to get out. So the meaning of the two serpents on the dollar, or the two serpents on the Caduceus staff, was only that of the deities known as Ishtar and Adept, who you don't really hear much about, but you just hear under the name An. And all these beings are moon gods. In fact, they say here that Nanar Sin, which is the Sumerian name for the moon, gave birth to Venus. And there's a connection between Venus and Hermes and the moon. In addition to that, to understand the Sumerian, the name Anu also means the moon. So the word Anunnaki means the moon. The word El was generally given as a term to mean the moon because El is more like a title. If you say El, you could be talking about anything. It's not specific. But if you go into the angles or the angels of the moon, then you find that the angels are actually stationed on the moon waiting to be dispatched. So that's why in such songs as J Electronica and the Loving the Stars, they're touting or touting the Els are coming. As you see in the comment El Nin, Nin only means Ishtar, so it would mean the Lord Nin is coming. And many people are afraid because this to them symbolizes some type of disaster. However, we've already touted once and for all at the Resistance that we can avoid such disasters by knowing what's exactly happening. So there is an esoteric nature to money that is continuously being upgraded. Understand that the first money that came out was really made of coins. And that word is synonymous with Cain. Cain and coin are the same word. Coin and Cohen, or the Hebrew word for priest, is the same word. And this word means king. So this is the priest king. So the priest kings carrying Ankh, which is A-N-K-H, which is the anagram for the word Khan, that's K-H-A-N. The Ankhs, or those who carried the Ankhs, were conning the individuals that they were coming upon with their alchemy. Because the alchemy of money is what we are really getting into today, which is how is it that something that has no value becomes of great value. Remember, the whole art of alchemy is that of turning dirt into gold. So there's nothing more that can be done with something of that nature than when you look at the analogy between money, which is basically printed paper, being able to even buy gold with it. So there is alchemy, it's already done. To look deeper into this, what we talked about last week was that money contains the frequency of everyone that is ever touched it and every transaction that it's ever been in. It contains the energy of that transaction. So thus, the individuals with very large amounts of money, like actual physical cash, not in the bank, are the ones that are doing the dirtiest deals here on the planet. So the one who has a house full of money is oftentimes a drug dealer, a weapons dealer, or something of that nature. So although that money has crossed over good people's hands, it's now in the possession of someone who's using it to do very negative things before it gets back to the bank, so that it's again circulated out to everyone once more, or all of the fish, as they call them, or the souls once more. Now remember, look at the symbolism here. The word bank means the actual front part of a river or stream, etc. And so at the bank, the fish are to meet to get their current. And then they take it and they become webbed by it. Because if you notice in the background of all money, it has a web. In those webs, you will see things on the other side of those webs, which are actually spiritual beings, letting you understand that this is not a game. I want to take a quick pause to let everyone realize once more that everything around you is being portrayed as a game to Jedi mind trick you. Now they're making the world a game. It's a matrix. It's a holographic reality. They make you watch games all day. Soccer, tennis, football, you name it. Or those who don't like that watch game shows. And those who don't like that play video games. So the reality is here, if they're telling you all around that this is a game, you know to do opposite. This is not a game. So money, as we talked about just a minute ago, is spreading its karma through this web that it's emitting through sacred geometry, because much of this sacred geometry is just in the symbol of a hexagon, which we know 100% is the main symbol of communication with everything here on this planet. That hexagonal shape is something that becomes formed around the individual when they begin to get involved in the ideas and the actions of this planet, and this becomes known as the mark of the beast. Now, I don't want everyone to get afraid and run out of the house and say, oh my goodness, we've taken the mark. Remember, all marks wash off. That they always are trying to tell you there's no way out, it's too late, you can't do anything. But the reality is that that's rhetoric. That the idea that they're pushing forth this reality is that they just want us to remain slaves any way they can. And their religions are the major component, and they're backed up by the money. And that's why the churches are never taxed, because they're into it too. And so what this becomes is money, if you notice this in the rectangle shape, is money becomes a door to different levels of consciousness. It becomes a portal through its sacred geometry to a whole program. Horn gods, demons from the other realm, and an individual in saying, I'm not involved in that, but still taking the currency and spending it, as it says, spin, which is the cycle of spinning or spiral. This is all related to current. When they spend the money and they begin to sell things, all of these words are the terminology given for when the individual is being binded as a spiritual being. So, also, keep in mind that towards the end of this show, I will be providing the solution of how a person can get unbinded from such things, but it becomes more important than anything to just make it very clear to everyone what exactly is happening. It's very important, especially during this time, because there is a big transition ready to take place. And you can make sure that you're on the right side of that transition if you just do what you know you need to do. And I'm giving you all the information for that now. So, basically, when people begin to take this money, the first what you'll notice is that there is a difference between a country. Actually, before we get into this, I'm going to take a brief break because I'm about halfway through the show. But when we get into the next half, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about what favoritism was going on, who was bringing this. We're going to talk about how the sacred geometry really works. We're going to talk about when religions and deities are involved. We're going to talk about mainly also the trees and their connection to things and what maybe they have to say about all this. We're going to talk about certain individuals being forced, such as trees, to participate in certain things that we now know to be a large part of the esoteric nature of our reality. It's important for people to wake up, understand you're dealing with people that have their third eye and their third ear open. And so the reason why you're hearing some of this stuff that you've never heard before is because you can't hear it. But we can hear it, and we can help you hear it too. But it's still going to be about you and whether or not you can realize that actually ingest this information, and not just as information, but feel exactly what's happening. And so again, I'm going to take this brief break, and I'm going to check on the live stream. We're going to come back to this in just a brief moment. Okay, for those that are just tuning in, we ask that you tune in to our live stream now. That's www.livestream.com/understanding. And we're going to be going through some images here really briefly to start to explain some things and our station here.
Sound General Quarters.
General Quarters, General Quarters. All hands man battle station. Check condition zebra.
General Quarters, battle station.
Okay, we're at the battle stations, and this is what's happening. The reality is that what they're attempting to do is they're even attempting to convince us here at the Resistance at times that what we're doing is not correct. It's a constant mind battle going on with those who attempt to keep us pacified and in this situation that doesn't appear to have ever changed just in doing just this. But for the first time for me, I've seen now enough information come across to completely remove a person from this equation of madness, or what I call the divided ones, playing around with the demons. So if you notice, like I said before, individuals have coerced other individuals to do certain things, just like they said in the original text that Satan convinced, or Lucifer, or whoever they want to say that did it, convinced a third of the angels to come with him so that they can develop other things. And that third is what we see where the constellation Alpha Draconis actually acts as a compass to show you the third of the beings that fell. And when that began to take place, people have to see now that it already happened. And we're actually on the rise again as far as being able to restore our original condition. If you think that this was your original condition right now, the way you are now, then you are horribly mistaken and in need of some tuning up. And that's what we're here to do. The reality becomes right now is that this, if you accept this as the original you, I can tell you now that there is higher states. This is nothing to do with one becoming like a god. In fact, we found out that God only means fire. If you want to just be complete fire and go burn everything up, then how long can you really do that before you would reach some level of frustration? Just like if you would be just water and drown in deluge and smother everything, how long would you be that before you hit frustration? It's important for everyone to know that we were created with a positive and a negative and a neutral, and that's what 3 means. It's a very powerful thing if you can tap into it, but also the power has corrupted absolutely. Individuals that are not ready for such things have hurled themselves headlong into disaster. And so what we're going to talk about is how that began to happen for this world. And originally it became a concept off of someone attempting to get all of the goods of everyone else, but for nothing. Meaning, there's a couple of these currencies that show that these people had massive resources in these countries. Even one bill in particular shows on the left side that there's crystals and diamonds and gems that belong there. But meanwhile, you have one who I think goes under the name Ham. And he was devising on another side of the world on how to come and take that from everyone. Because just as if you read in the Cetiopigrapha, it explains that Ham began to conspire against his brothers because he was given the desert as his lot. And this is something that happened way before we got here, but if we want to keep denying that it's going on, then why is Ham, as you see in the war, they have General Ham now, keep attacking everything and everyone? And why is Ham some of the nastiest unclean meat that you could ever ingest? You should not Like I said, again, you should not be eating meat. There is one particular post that I want to put up. It's actually explains the repercussions for actually eating meat from a spiritual level because of, and this is done by the Spiritual Research Foundation, which is in India. I cannot convey to you enough in this time span that I have, and even this format that I have, what you need to do to get yourself in order. But I have all that information, and we have all that information connected with the Resistance website and the Wholeness Foundation. It's very important for people to keep sending out the message and also to keep supporting, because as we dig into this, the reality is that you would always want to contribute to someone who is doing something like this because it's really being done for you. It's just as simple as that. The further that we can go into it, the easier that we can make it for everyone to get themselves out of the situation as we become more and more creative. But straight up, the only way that a person, and I'm giving the solution now for those who don't have the time to listen all day, is those who want to get themselves out of this have to start looking at how they're planting their seed now, how they're planting their money, and where they're putting it. And can you make your money generate something positive to start digging you out of what appears to be a web? I believe that this 8 is the symbolism, of course, of the spider, because the spider has 8 legs, and this being has wrapped webs and binded humans using poisonous trees, vines, and ivy. This is what I am seeing on the other realm. And that what generally happens is that a shell begins to build up around the person that tends to look something like an insectoid, but the person remains inside. And the only thing that's actually keeping them there is their shallow breathing. That our language is actually breath. Because if you listen to a person's breath, you can hear and feel every single thing that if they're sincere. And then if they're not sincere, they just breathe shallow. This becomes a way of knowing if a being is really tapped in or if it may be just another sleeper that's being... Look at this symbolism that's being used on the currency. What you see is certain men were either did one or two things. Either one, they were always in it, and this is symbolized as the double-headed eagle. That means that they have an affiliation with both families of the bloodlines. That bloodline is Naga and Aryan. So the next symbolism, dark Naga and alien, Aryans. It depends on how you look at it. So the ones that don't have that double-headed eagle but just have one eagle, then they're basically the servants. They are being conned to bring their goods. They generally give them something like a bridge, bank to the time, and they give them some type of building that the government and different individuals that are like a tribe leader can use as their quarters. And then they also, hey, you can go and do it. If you come into our group, there's already these involved in our group. And so you can only imagine how this started. This probably started with a lie, with one being saying, hey, we already got them to do it. You should go ahead and do it too. Because if you do it, then you can shop with us. If you do the money thing, then you can trade with even China. Look at the goods that come from China. And they used to bring them gifts. And this is going to be an actual series because I'm definitely going to free the world from this. I feel like it's my job and duty. The reality is that they started to go into these countries, especially the Dutch and these different individuals, and show them these trinkets and things that they were getting from other places, some stuff that they weren't even creating themselves. And then they're telling the individual, look, if you sign these contracts and these papers and start printing this note, and we'll even use your tree. We'll use your sacred tree, and we'll blend it, and it will have the currency and the power. This is the next level of the transition. This is how it came to our forefathers and foremothers, because they told them that the double square actually symbolized the two worlds coming into balance. And this is never, two doesn't come into balance. It's two. It takes three to balance something. That's why two is a dual. It's always in conflict. And so these beings already knew all of this when they began this, and that's why they get no respect from me. And the reality is that until I breathe my last breath, I will be revealing all of it because I'm tapped in. And people need to understand, well, how do you know all this stuff and how are you guided to all this stuff? Because it's like something in my own bloodline. Like I'm already like 5 bloodlines just from the colonization. But because I'm still not shabby in the mind and I'm not sleep and I'm not sluggish, I can actually hear them, and I can hear what they say. And like I said, the fear-mongering has got to stop. All they're saying on their end is every 2 to 3 months now. We need it that much. Predict a major disaster. It's insane, because the reality is that I tell you the truth, September 11th, the day will come and it will go. And for all those people that were scared today about them predicting that something is going to happen today, woe to them. This is not the time to be using your energy as such, and that's why also the resistance is turning again, like I said, into a faction to debunk the bull crap, which is really from the bull, the papal bull, but also not be backing down off of this knowledge and saying, okay, we're not gonna say anything about it anymore. No, we're gonna say more about it than ever, and we're gonna give the solutions more than ever, because that's what we do. We've already done it. That's the reality. People need to stop looking at our faction as something that is yet to come. It's already here. We're doing it. We're telling you this is what happens on the other side. I have people around me that have walked into the other side before and seen what's going on there. We've seen the jokers and the jesters and the tessellated floors on the dark side of the moon. We've seen the Nazis completely take over everything, because the only reports you ever get from space telling you that you're on Earth comes from Nazis. That's it. How could you ever expect for them to tell the truth? Because they're not into it like that. They're into the opposite of what, they're into an opposite. They're into what people are slowly making themselves, which is expecting everything as one thing to be perfectly the way they want it. Meaning that they're looking for this archetype, this one to them that equals, that's the person. And they've done it with several Hollywood figures, and they give you this prototype to go by. And then from that point, the person just starts to feed into the monster, feed all of their energy into the beast, as the beast circulates through their hand. It's in their palm, and then it's in their mind, it's in their forehead. And then I'm living in a dimension in which I practice into these things and done it because of an occultation that's been taking place with all of us. But I'd be damned if I just sit here and just let it happen and not say nothing about it and not do nothing about it, because that's what'll free you. That's if you actually take that money and then you go to your bank and you see how much they'll give you if you have your good credit. If people are so weird now, if you know that something like the comet was coming, then you know you have some type of resources that laying around, man, get rid of that stuff and go and live your life somewhere. Cut it off now. It's almost like the gambler that doesn't want to get up from the table. It's a game, okay? This is what they're playing out here in the reality so that people don't know what's really going on. Now, I know about this because my name is James, and a J is really a G. So that means my first name is Games. And I have a feeling, because I know all of this stuff, that I probably was playing games for lifetimes. I was playing it on hard mode even. But the reality becomes is that it's enough of thought. Enough thought. Enough ethereal, can't feel it, but that's what we're supposed to be. Oh, I'm happy. Yes, this is a state we can hit. Like, it's easy. It's a couple biochemical cell salts in the right place. It's a couple magnets pinned in the right place. It's a couple crystals put in the right place. It's a couple elements swallowed, then go to the right place. There were so many ways, but you just had to be consistent. That's the world. It's consistency. It can't stick with anything for too long before it moves on to something else. Never seeing the completion of it. And then getting desperate when resources and things start to run out. And then that desperate makes one do things like you see these men on these dollar bills doing. When they came to them, the conversation was joyous for them. Many of these men were waiting on the time for them to come and talk to them, just like people now are acting like the Illuminati is going to come talk to them, doing things that are like Illuminati-ish, covering one eye and carrying pyramids around, that kind of behavior, as if you're entertaining something that you don't even understand how it's rolled across the world and pillaged everything. This affiliation is the problem, and you cut out the cancer, or can, which means serpent. Sir means serpent. Cut out the double serpent, the poison. So the last options are really coming to this planet. We wrote the code of the Matrix like 3 years ago now, 2 years ago, something like this. All of this information coming out about things like this. And then I was forced to back down because when coming out with it in the power and the strength that it had, then all of a sudden I was labeled the spiritual imposter. How am I the spiritual imposter? But that's what you learn about the reality, is that whatever it sometimes is telling you to do, if you're not listening to awake people, just do opposite. You can just kind of get there. If they're standing up, sit down. It's like if they're not breathing, breathe. That's where we're at now until you get around individuals who are not there, and that becomes the next thing. The next thing is, okay, so basically what I saw is that as these hyperdimensional beings that we are, wherever you sent your mind as a reference point, if you could hold it there long enough, then all of a sudden you would basically start to live there. It's kind of weird, but half of your day would be spent there. This becomes like the mystery that they keep talking about these goddesses who spend like a part of this year in the underworld. This is like a deeper myth. And it's really about humans, because humans were gods and goddesses together. They weren't like divided like that. So what this is really about is oh man, I just lost my train of thought. I guess you guys aren't supposed to know that. So anyway, let me get back to the currency here. The currency is obviously showing you that when faced with certain decisions, many individuals that were our representatives because they connected to us in bloodline. Notice that every tribe leader, every shaman or medicine man is only chosen to be that. Every priest, even if you go into Judaism, every imam, high imam, in the real Wahhab Islam, where they're following all the orthodoxy, any master Sufi, any of these individuals, what you will notice is that they must go through an extreme level of spiritual contact before they can get elected into that position. So this means that behind what's controlling everything, there is beings that are very equipped with an esoteric system of magic that is only applicable for this dimension only. It's foolishness to the high beings. They don't even understand how it works, for better lack of words, meaning that it's based on one thing, energy, to them. Are you building energy, or are you taking energy? Are you sowing into the building of more good energy, or are you sowing into the building of more negative energy? Simple as that. So people talk about the laws of the universe, as the laws of the universe are going to save them, and actually the laws of the universe are what's keeping us here. Because according to the laws of the universe, we're hooked up with the bad guys. And we've gotten so deep into it, we can't even see that that's exactly what's going on. That's what's happening to the planet. Now we're here so close. There's so many synchronizations happening with time and things of that nature. Obviously, we're close to time wave zero. I haven't already been to time wave zero before, so I will tell you what it was like. Whatever you thought you were, you became. If it was too high, then what you really could get to, you would land somewhere in between. These realities can be gone to every day even, meaning that you can actually leave this world and go to another world for half of the time in the day. That's actually what I was talking about. I'm glad I got around to this again, and I do apologize that sometimes I have quantum thoughts going on top of other things, and they start to collide and make other things. But basically, this dual nature, this gods and goddesses. Just give me this laugh. Excuse me, everyone, for just a brief moment. Okay, everyone, there's that. What I'm going to do is I want everyone to know if you have a question, you can actually press 1, and the dial pad will actually let me know that you do have a question. I'm going to have to take just a brief moment to organize something here on the computer panel so that we don't lose sound, and I'm going to come right forward when that happens. Okay, so we just had a slight technical difficulty here, and what we're going to do is to make sure that we're able to broadcast the last part of this message. We're just going to do that now. That way we have enough time to finish talking about what we were discussing earlier. I wanted to talk about the solution, because it's just very important for that to be conveyed. Now, people should realize that, as you see on this currency, that there is other individuals that actually made an agreement. All we're doing is kind of upholding the agreement. We're like the current that comes with it. Sometimes the school of fish is being led by one fish. And when that fish is removed, then everyone gets an opportunity to go into the direction that they've been planning and ready to go in. And this is the case that we have to look at, because where are most people headed right now? Mentally, spiritually, and physically, because of what they've been doing and involved in that they don't even know about. If we think that it doesn't matter if you know about something or not, whether it's going to affect you, I believe that we've lived lifetimes of thinking that it's not going to affect us, thinking that we don't have to make a decision, thinking that we could just leave it on autopilot, someone's going to take care of it for us. And the reality is that is not what's happening. What's happening is that we're tumbling down lives. Now we're divided beings. We have man and woman here on the planet when we were once together. Who is the real demon? I know a lot of this stuff is tough, and it's because of the environment that we've grown up in. It's taught us not to brave things. It's taught us not to have to exert ourselves. And that's why most people, they don't breathe a lot, they don't work out, they just can't bring up the energy to do it. And that is a part of how it finishes trapping the individual. It's a web over them, it doesn't want to fight, it sends a little poison, like the money of the poisonous snake. The person starts to run themselves out of energy, and then they run out of so much energy that they can't even break out of the web. We are coming with swords. We're cutting people out of the web. This is the job, the responsibility of us all here in humanity. Regardless of whatever this reality is constructed of. If we don't do what we need to do, it only proves to each of us how we would have in life towards the world we need this. It's becoming very, very, very important to understand that something like that is written on your field of what you did during this particular time when not just the universe, but everything, the zero was outside of what we know, even needed us to make a real decision for one our lives about whether we're going to get into this, whether we're going to now accept certain things in the universe because you feel like you can do it. This can bring your energy back. Knowing the knowledge, it's just like a person who has never talked about something that is them or they've been abused by. And they say that it rests within their consciousness and causes certain character flaws. So imagine how much character flaw is being caused by people doing magic and things of that nature and tricking people by writing holy books that tug on their soul but still leave them empty. You see, like this is the predatory nature of this reality. And then when a person gets close enough to realizing they can break themselves from it, then it tries to wash over them and say, you're already free. But I tell you the truth, you're not free unless everyone's free. Because we're all connected. That's the reality. So you have some people who've been storing up cash, collecting, being Smeagol. And then you have some people who have nothing. These two are about to come together for the last grand finale. It's not even, people don't understand. They think that when Earth hits its final state of balance, that it's just going to be like Earth, and we're all going to be happy, walking around with smiles on our faces. Then it's going to go to a whole higher dimension immediately. Then it's like the moment that whatever the negative part or the part that's holding everyone back is released and cut, we slingshot out of here. Now, the interesting part about a lot of this experience that we had is it's also given us the brains and the minds of gods and goddesses. This is what they call the gift and the curse. So we kind of know how things work, even to the point where we even know how to cut ties with negative things using a Skype, as they say in this one text. It says, Thoth, I'm going to read it here, also has a negative aspect. So I guess in this case his negative would even at sometimes be his positive, if you understand how some of these beings are calibrated. It's Thoth Abraxas Lunar 2. I don't think you have it. Let me...
Yes, it's up on screen now.
Okay. It says, however, Thoth's nature has a dangerous side. He is called the cutting one, whose knife is thought of as the crescent moon. Okay? Now remember, about 3 shows ago, we were telling people that the crescent moon was like a scythe. The Scythians were using it. It says, the god is often represented armed with a knife. Thoth was regarded as the murderer of Osiris. I bet the Egyptian lovers would love to hear that. Because he was a bad protector of the moon's phases, meaning that after a while, Osiris started slipping on his game about how he was going to let the moon manipulate everything, and then all of a sudden, Thoth tightened him up. It says he appears hostile to the deceased and to the gods, who were afraid of his destructive powers. Thoth had been born in an unnatural way from the head of the Neoset, the violent god par excellence. Indeed, he was said to have no mother, although occasionally Neith is mentioned as his parent. To this may be added Thoth's bad reputation as a trickster who steals the offering and mischievously diverts 1/4 of a day at the end of each month. So, what that means is that the archon, which means arc, of course, we got one arc, that's a D. You get 2 arcs, that's a whole. So now you got a completed being. So archangel is basically a demon. He's a divided spirit. So I'm sure they have a word for this in Arabic. So these beings, they say in the Gnosticism, were birthed from basically the explosion of Earth when coming into existence. That even the explosion itself caused energy to create these archons who don't have a mother. And at least this is the story that they're going by. But it also lends a lot of credit to how they behave and what they say about where they came from. And many of these concepts you'll see in Final Fantasy with the character Sephiroth. You'll see this character within the Golem. It's basically the being that has been created, but not in the same way creation comes about. Meaning that, for us, we know we came from the mother, the ma, the womb, because we see it happen all the time. But many of the ancient beings, you didn't see what kind of womb they came out of. So don't automatically assume, like we do at times when we think that we're alone here, that they came out of the same type of womb or same type of geometry. And so that's what we found out. We found out that the iris of a being's eye, animal, insect, etc., corresponded to what exactly the dimension that their archetype really resides on. And they simply remain here as a fractal, as we remain here also as a fractal of who our higher self really is, which appears to be because of the consciousness level chained down. But the higher consciousness for many individuals has already freed itself, and now it's attempting to free its final component in the dimension called Earth, as it's traveling down dimensions, freeing up itself. And this is happening for multiple people. And the phases in between it happening are our responsibility. And that's what I just want to get through to everyone. Our responsibility is that what I'm explaining to you is going to happen anyway. We're the people that make it happen, though. We've already taken initiative. Right now we're developing so much stuff to bring out to people, even homeschool curriculum systems, to prepare them as fast as possible. We're talking about things that can transform a person within a month. But I tell you the truth, we've been doing this on nothing as far as finances are concerned. It's just been miracle after miracle after miracle with how things even just keep going here. But if we had more support to actually really do something with, you can only imagine. What this only shows is that with having basically very little support, we've been able to do all of this. So imagine what we can do. And I've been saying this. Why do you think that it's been 2.5, 3 years that I've been giving knowledge like this, but I receive no support and no recognition from anyone? When people that have done a fraction of what I've produced here, that's just here. I'm not to brag about it. It's in the works. They've done even smaller percentages of that, and then I've given it away for free, but they won't even give me a call. Probably doing something right, huh? So I'm glad at this point in learning the final secret, which is what will be made available to you, is understanding the secret of the currency, which is that, well, that I'll leave for this publication that I'm putting out right now, because it's got to be exposed. It's got to be shown, and we're definitely going to bring people out of it. So there's only, I think, 15 minutes left in today's show. I'm going to once again give everyone an opportunity to press 1 or to ask any question. If you do have a question, you can type that in the chat box. Okay, I'm now looking into the Blog Talk Radio chat box to see if there's any questions being typed there. Also, we're going to log on to the Resistance website real quick and see if there's any questions there in that box. And if not, this is definitely a point where we can end the show. Also, to tell people, if they want to know, very easy, what should I do? It's your seeds. Your money has been where you plant it. Even when giving it for rent and things of this nature, it really does matter. The best thing that you can do for yourself is accumulate as much of it as possible, as fast as possible, and go and get yourself self-substantiated. We will be talking about self-substantiation here within the next 2 weeks. What this means is that you have well water, you have a generator, you have the things that are necessary and you have fruit trees, things that would be necessary for you to just completely jump off the grid and not have to worry about using money. And then from that point, you can also utilize the energy that you can build up naturally as your new currency, and you can watch that take care of everything else, because basically you don't touch it. There was one thing that's interesting when I came out of the portal. I'll just remark on this now, is that the beings that I was in contact with did not want me to really touch money much, because they had clearly marked it as being like had some type of negative field on it. So I believe what you can do is use the citrine, because that's why it's one of the only crystals that never need to be cleaned, and use the selenite, those two crystals that never need to be clean, and put it in conjunction with your money just to wash it up a little bit. This is real money laundering, but I'm telling you, it can help you. I'm here to assist you as much as possible in the situation. It's almost like I'm being briefed about what the situation is, and I just have to figure out how to articulate it properly, but you can only imagine what it would do to my brain to have all of this information at one time. Glorious. It's like you really have a solution. It just takes time for it to actually come out, all of it, because the solution is different for many people. We have many different kind of beings here, and that's also what the resistance is about. And that's why we have no color lines. We have no species lines. We don't hate the reptilians. We don't hate the lions. We don't hate anyone save those that... Actually, we don't hate anyone. We don't even want to associate it with the energy. But the reality is that there are those that need to be exposed, and that's what we're here to do. And if people perceive that as hate, then they're confused. Because even sometimes it feels like you're angry, but what else can you feel when you find out you've been asleep for so long, and that we really could become and be very powerful beings? And just even getting the reference points, meaning that a lot of the stuff that I've been able to have the opportunity to be around, like the Ayurvedics and the monatomic gold and the breathing, whole body breathing, have taken me into a higher state of consciousness beyond what I'm explaining to you here. I'm using such a lower form of communication with talking, because I have so much to say, but only one mouth. And that's sometimes why my memory starts to stumble over itself. It's just something that happens. But as we go on more, we'll be able to pull this out and to show people exactly what it is. I'm taking a look one more time at the chat box. I do have a question here, and I'm going to go ahead and take that question. Caller, your area code is area code 505. You're actually on the air with Esoteric Radio. How can we assist you?
Hey, Brother Sevan, it's Nima. Haven't chimed in a while, but need to support a little more. It's interesting how you mentioned the citrine and actually transferring the currency a little bit. Can you expound a little bit on grounding out that currency as we would with an electrical field, the same way with money, as in grounding out and actually dispersing some of it?
Well, really what you would be doing with money, it's almost like if you had something that was contaminated, there's still only a certain level of cleaning that you can do it if it has a core of contamination. So this is like a bacteria. And so no matter how much bleach you pour on it, if there's something that is inside of it that is causing it to become a bacteria, then it can only be washed somewhat to make it have less of an effect. It's like we can only lessen its effect, but we will never be able to eliminate its effect entirely until we stop using it. Lessening its effect would be, of course, making sure that where it goes, you can see where it goes, at least one hand, two hands at times. It's like if you know, like when you pay rent, you don't know where the money goes. So, and then ultimately it ends up in the hands of individuals that have very negative energy and their DNA and everything that is there. And it's like that connection is what we are now working on cutting. But just with anything, you can't just cut something where we've been getting all of our fuel from it. It would actually kill the host. It would have to learn how to plug itself into something else and then cut. You see, so it becomes like a real procedure, almost like a surgical procedure to remove people from money. But the citrine and the selenite will come to aid. If you realize that definitely all of these crystals are alive, the beings that they correspond to already made a long time ago. So they've already figured out the solution. But when you're dealing with darkness, that's just what it is. It can't be anything else, because then it would just cease to even be as a component. There wouldn't even be a counterweight. Then our whole universe and mentality would topple. So the reality is that we have to address it from the level of knowing, like these pictures are showing on the live stream, that there are beings behind this. They look strange. They are the real extraterrestrials, and they're there. And when you're in an altered state of consciousness, you can see them too. And so I know they 100%. So there's no amount of, if you have this guy in your hand and he's vibrating right into your energy center, which is where your hand is, that's not going to have some kind of effect. But that's why it says you can get this wisdom to actually know about all this, and this begins the steps. You start to actually awake and realize what's happening. You realize, okay, this is serious. You mean I'm in Earth right now during the Mark of the Beast program? Oh, hell no, let me get out of here. Because that's what it is for them. It's capital Hill, or Hill, H-L-L. That's the Kabbalistic word for hell. The Kabbalistic word for the moon is Hillel. As you see even with the Dr. Bronner Stokes, Dr. Bronner went against Hillel, who was teaching, a man named Hillel in Europe that was teaching all these men alchemy and everything to do with how to cut trees and all sorts of stuff. And Dr. Bronner still has on his labels, I had to fight with the great Master Hillel because he was incorrect, that we are all one. But the Master Hillel was telling them, no, you're divided. This is the moon. You see? And this type of knowledge is, when is this? This is now the time for it to come out and for people to be invigorated off of it, because they've tried everything else now. Now they have no choice but to come and fess up to the actual truth. And so that's what we're doing. So again, brother, I definitely appreciate you calling in. If you have another question, I can take that question. We have about 4 more minutes left in the conversation.
I'll leave it open. Thank you very much. We'll have to expound a little more with more time. Thank you.
Definitely, and for everyone that is looking for more expounding on this, I'm definitely going to be putting out a publication. It's called The History of Currency, and we're just going to take it apart from the Zoom, because it's easier for me to zoom in and to show what's there, show who's involved, show what plant, and even how even plant consciousness has been affected, meaning that a plant can make a decision to serve something that's dark. And this is when we start giving respect to the planet also, about how much it is really alive. Because at this point, sometimes we think that, oh man, it's just Mother Earth and it's just a hologram and, they got everyone thinking all this weird stuff, but the reality is that all of what you see around you is alive. It's just something about the actual frequency we're on, because the reality is that when entering into an altered state of consciousness, now when I mention altered state of consciousness, it's not to mention other things, because there's certain things you can and cannot say now, and in order to just avoid trouble. But when I speak of a higher altered state of consciousness, I'm not talking about being drunk or anything like that. I'm talking about actually being in the state in which you are completely active as far as your chakra center. And at this point, your third eye, your third ear turns on. And then you see things as they really are, which is very similar to the way that you see them now, but they're alive. And then from that point, communication begins to take place. Communication on that realm is everything, basically. All ether really is ideas and communication and spirits and all of this stuff jumbled together until it makes geometric patterns that equal the reality because they project sound. Then what ends up happening from here is that our harmonic frequency is then tapped into and made so that I'm basically at times controlling the guy next to me's reality of being here. And then he's triangulating that to the other guy in his reality to be here. And that's why when you go on like a monk mission and you end up in a cave somewhere and you start to meditate, if you tap out of here and you open your eyes, you're out of here. You're not in this world anymore because no one's projecting that. You're out. That's why I said there's a power now in returning to the roots, because if you look at some of these old these videos on BBC about some of these inaccessible places of Africa, and you just look at these places and they got them in high definition, you can see the power of returning to roots because you would have all the data of who you are. It would talk to you. The land would talk to you. That's how it would work. It's not something that they can stop. It's something you can stop, though. And that's why it's important for us now. I can do it as many ways as you need it. That's what I'm here to do. I can explain to people in so many different ways how they need to wake up. I ask also that people, when leaving this call, before leaving, if you could press, I believe it's star or 1 to hear whatever this advertisement is. It does help the show go up more in rank, and that way more people can actually listen to the show. I definitely want to say, just on another note, that man, this has just been a phenomenal journey. Like, regardless of all of this, like I said before, and there's many of us are equipped to deal with things if we happen to be released from this body at one moment. Meaning that anything like we were talking about with these fear-mongering, what's the worst could happen? You would end up outside of your body. If you still think that is the downside to things, then you're caught up in what they call an island kind of concept, which the Sufis talk about, thinking that that the island is the only thing that exists, but it's not. But first you must cross the sea. I will tell you the truth. It's been a pleasure being here today. I want to thank everyone that definitely is in the studio, Mr. Spirit Matter for working the live stream. I also wanted to give a big thanks to Louise Hull behind the camera all the time, making it happen. I even saw someone on Facebook say, well, what does the other guy have to say about all of this? Because he's always behind that camera working in cinematography, but he definitely understands that one thing about a movie producer is he's never on camera. And I definitely want to again say wholeness and balance vibration to everyone. Thank you to Muna, and thank you to John, and all the other supporters of the Resistance, Miriam, and all the individuals that have come forward, Quantum. I mean, just to name names is almost injustice. There's so many. Thank you again.
Thank you.